I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am.
So what's new with you in the last hour?
Well, I went and ate some leftover stir-fry beef.
Disgusting.
I blew a circuit. Is that what it's called? I popped a circuit.
You blew a circuit?
I was running too many things in the kitchen at once, and it flipped it.
Oh.
What's it called?
Oh my God, I blanked.
Well, it's blew it now. I blew a circuit.
You can say blew a circuit, but there's a
You
different...
either blew a fuse or...
You tripped a fuse. Or
tripped a circuit.
Tripped
That's
a circuit.
it. I was tripping.
The circuit, but it's not even fuse or circuit. Usually it's like... Or maybe it's fuse, you would usually say.
No,
there's some other word.
Fuse is the old one.
There's like 15 people right now listening to podcasts going, it's a fucking bat! I've done that so many times. People are debating on podcasts. I'm like screaming at the radio.
I forget words all the time, and so there's always there's comments.
I transpose words all the time, so...
Yeah. The last episode you said impinge on rights.
Impinge on rights?
Instead of infringe. You pinched my rights.
Impinge.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's tripped a circuit.
No.
What are those things called?
I can't fucking think of it because you're asking me for some reason. It was there, and then you asked me. I was like, oh, it's gone.
What is that thing called?
That thing is called...
a circuit box.
God, it's not called that. It's so obvious. Let me go look at... Is there a label on it? Is there a... Hold on.
What's the box called that you trip the circuit? What's the box? He's yelling, don't ask. What's the box called where you trip the circuit? Breaker box. There's no way it said breaker box on there. It's not even labeled the right rooms.
It's funny, on our breaker box, it's got a huge label. It says, "This is a breaker box."
Does it?
No.
No, of course not.
It's a breaker box, everybody. Thank you for screaming it in the ether so we all could hear it finally.
Yeah, I mean, I asked ChatGPT.
All right, that's all we got for today. Love you, bye.
And I was whispering because you said don't ask ChatGPT. So I said the box called that you tripped the circuit. What's he's yelling? Don't ask the box called or you tripped the circuit.
And it still
and
got
it said, it sounds like you're describing a situation where someone tripped a breaker box. If someone yells, you tripped the circuit, they likely mean the circuit breaker has flipped due to an electrical overload.
Thanks, ChatGPT. I'm glad you got us out of that mess.
Anyway, so I tripped the circuit box making a matcha or a chai at the same time as the steak. That's what I've been up to since the last hour. I've also my latest rabbit hole is passenger consciousness. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
So the premise of passenger consciousness is after you have done what seems to be about 7 years of deconditioning, you learn to experience life with your mind as a passenger, living in the truth of your own individual circuitry, where what we've been living in our unconsciousness is a combination of other people's programs or like the background frequencies programs, and our mind trying to keep us in line with that.
And the mind making all the decisions.
Right. Based on conditioning,
yeah.
Basically.
And needing to, it's like the mind is all about computing all the data and the logic.
Right.
To make sense of and compute everything.
Right.
And so the passenger consciousness is it's a human design concept, and it's more saying that there's a different way to fall in alignment by making decisions through your body,
Correct.
aka your strategy or authority, as opposed to mentally thinking about it, right?
Right. So passenger consciousness, the idea is that the vehicle is the body.
Mm-hmm.
And the body has all of the intelligence for where you should be, what you should be doing. That's the vehicle, and that your strategy and authority in human design, which is different for different types, is the guide to what you're supposed to be doing. And
the observer is the mind, then?
You're really there to just observe. Yeah. It's here to observe and experience and not make decisions.
Yeah, and this is I have a lot of sessions talking about this very thing because it's the big adjustment that we're all needing to make is we've been conditioned to use the mind to make decisions. You have things like, that's a big decision. You should think through it really hard. Take some time, make a pros and cons list, use all the logic and collect all the data you can to make that difficult decision. Where human design is saying, no, that's going to get you into a mess of not having enough data. Your subtle, subconscious desires are all going to be in your mind. And so this is all going to get in the way of making the most in alignment decision.
And it's not even just the conscious mind, because the mind is very vague. It's not just the conscious mind, the thoughts you can hear. It's also the conditioning. So an example of this is this vague pressure to be productive every single day, right? This is a piece of conditioning I still deal with. Like if I don't have something to show for my day, I haven't accomplished something, then I feel like guilt and shame or like I'm useless or whatever. That is an example of a construct. Like I'm conditioned, I've internalized the construct of like hustle culture that you need to externally have something to show for what you've done and that you need to be productive. You need to be a worker bee. You need to be contributing something every single day. And so if I take a rest day without having accomplished something, then I feel
inadequate,
unworthy, useless, lazy. Lazy's another. It's like concepts that are out there, conditioning that is out there, that is either energetically held out there or collectively held beliefs we absorb and internalize. Just like I internalized a lot of misogyny about women. And so for a lot of my life, I rejected aspects of femininity because I absorbed the kind of patriarchal perception of women. So I rejected my own emotional experience. I rejected my own needs. I rejected my own, what I consider to be high maintenance, because I internalized some vague kind of constructs out there, right? So we are all just kind of sponges for conditioning, and therefore we start to take on like ideas that are not even ours, and they're kind of running in the background. They're usually so subconscious that they're not necessarily your thinking in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
we are, most of us are heavily influenced by what they are going to think, and that's just us internalizing other people's thoughts. But they want me to make this kind of music, or they are going to be mad if I leave this relationship, or they are going to be pissed if I don't go to college, or, that's all conditioning.
Yeah. And I feel a lot of those things, I get questions a lot about like what this deconditioning thing, like I hear it all the time, but like, what is it? How do I go at it? And it's difficult because a lot of times the conditioning that's most dominant in our life, like we don't know is there. It's kind of become a habit. So I really like the idea of moving into that observer space, like when that occurs, because you can, if you're in the observer, you're not attached to the experience. You can kind of just like watch it, and it's easier to see some of the nonsense in it, and that's the process of like just being able to stop and observe the thing. You can see that part of the reason you're feeling a certain way is because you were led to believe to think that way. Like and you can see it's a conditioned thing.
Right.
Just being able to stop allows you to actually catch it, because so much of them are subconscious. And I think that's the beginning of like starting to decondition, is being able to stop and catch those habits coming in, and then being able to question which ones you resonate with, and see that some of them were given to you and you've abided by them, but for what, Right.
Yeah. So the interesting thing here, and I've maybe contributed this, I guess, a lot because I've not shut the fuck up about the cross of sleeping phoenix and the cross of planning recently. But so the cross of planning it's the background frequency. And so that is conditioning you. And it doesn't necessarily, like for the cross of planning, it didn't resonate with my actual energy. And so a lot of the pain and difficulty in my life was that in my unconsciousness, I put myself in all these situations trying to fit in that energy. Where if I had the awareness that I have now, I would know to do what my body wants to do and not what this generalized idea I had. Because the background frequency will have us thinking that that's the premise of the entire human experience.
Yeah.
And you see this now with people trying to make America great, to go back. We're going to go back to family values. We're going to go back to when people like to work or whatever. It's because they really think that that's what the human experience is, because that's all they've known. And so as we move into the cross of sleeping phoenix, for people that aren't designed as individuals, it will be important for them to stick to themselves, because there will be new constructs that are not good nor bad. They just are. So there will be new constructs influencing them, and you can take in that conditioning when it benefits you, but then also kind of stay awake to the ways that it doesn't benefit you, So trying to fit myself into collective homogenized ideas of what is supposed to be, what is right, what is beautiful, what is ever, that caused a lot of confusion and difficulty in my life. And now there's so much representation of people who are like me. It's crazy. Like I've been swimming upstream my entire life with sensory issues, but I didn't know that they were sensory issues. I didn't realize like my armpits touching each other or the way that the distance between my legs, or whether or not this fabric feels kind of scratchy, or now I'm too hot, or now I'm too cold, or now I'm too wet. Like I am everywhere I ever go. It's like the purse has to have every fucking possible thing I need in it. And if I can't get a hot beverage while I'm out at the thing, then I don't want to be at the thing, because then that's going to make me feel kind of weird, you know? And if you know me, you know these things, because I'm a pain in the ass to go somewhere with. But I didn't have social media being like, these are sensory issues because you're autistic. Like I didn't have any of that framework. I was just like, why can't you be normal? Why can't you stop sweating? Why can't you sit still? Why can't you wear clothes like everyone else can wear clothes? Why can't you handle the smell in this room? You know? And I wasted like 4 decades of my life trying to act the way that other people act, you know, fit in the way that other people fit in, like quietly really frustrated with myself that I can't just do what seems very easy, and that I don't enjoy what it seems like everyone else enjoys. And that was all the conditioning leading me to believe that everyone else was experiencing was the human experience, and I was doing something wrong. I was failing to fit in. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we're already seeing, as we move into super individual energy, I think we're already seeing people who are built to build systems, to create collective things, start to feel weird with the individual energy, starting to feel pressure to do things that don't come naturally to them, that they don't enjoy. You know, people who are more comfortable with a consensus reality, feeling, you know, adrift, and we haven't even really gotten started yet, but feeling adrift with the lack of unity and community and stuff. And so I think passenger consciousness says, yeah, the cross of sleeping phoenix is going to be pumping you with individual energy that you will still learn from, but you are not obligated to now go become an individual circuitry person. You can now use this energy to then create systems and communities and stuff for people that want that, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess if the deconditioning process comes down to the strategy and authority of your design, which I don't know. I don't feel like did you do a lot of, I'm not good at like getting into a practice of something or whatever. And so I feel like these things kind of naturally happen. So I don't know that I was ever consciously going, am I checking with my strategy or my authority?
I didn't like, before I knew about human design, I actually was, I was using my intuition. So I'm a splenic authority, projector. So strategies wait for the invitation. Authority is splenic. So it's like an instinct, a very clear knowing right when the decision is to be made. The more I think about it, the less clear that is. And I don't know, I think like the first 3 big decisions I made in my life were made like in an intuitive space and made no logical sense on the outside. Like everybody that was trying to give me advice was saying no, and inside it's saying yes. And so I just went with it. And each of those 3 decisions were such pivotal moments that like aligned, when I followed that, they aligned so perfectly to make it work, that there was something that I knew I was correct in, but I didn't have a label for it, and I just called it intuition. And most people would say I was actually just lucky. But to me, I knew that there was something I was responding to that was putting me into alignment. And I think then as I became awake and became more aware of that and learned about human design is where I actually kind of lost touch with it, because I woke up through the mind, and I woke up through like thinking a lot and looking for all the answers and stuff. And so that I was trusting that more because it was actually helping me decondition. But then I lost sight in like big decisions with what was my splenic intuition and then what was my mind's intuition that was kind of masquerading as the spleen.
Interesting.
And with all these new conscious ideas and like words to use and perspectives, I lost touch with the subtle differences of those. And that's when I then kind of like started to develop some kind of practice. It's not a practice, but it was just trying to discern what the difference is. And I think this is an interesting example of like this passenger consciousness and just the power, the potential of making decisions with your body instead of your mind. For me, like a spleen's a good example because the spleen as an authority type for me was just something that I could actually pretty quickly start experimenting with. Some of the other authorities, you can do the same thing, but some of them are a little more complicated and you got to wait. But for me, it was like, oh, I can just go out into the world, like go drive or go walk and just make every decision these are all going to be small decisions. It's not like a heavy life-changing decision, but
where to turn.
Am I going to go left or am I going to go right?
Yeah.
Just whatever the first thing is. Okay, go. And do that like for a whole day and like see where it leads me, see what kind of experiences I have if I just follow that. And I would experiment like, I mean, I think I did this when I was young too, just because I was like bored. Again, I didn't know it was like a human design thing, but being able to trust that and then observe the reality, like look for any kind of symbolism, synchronistic things that come up that engage my mind or start to like unlock certain things for me, that would occur. And then also there would be like a serendipitous meetup of some sort that I would actually run into somebody that I hadn't seen in forever, and that we would talk about something and it would unlock something for me, or I would become really good friends with that person now, or I would meet somebody that then would become like a creative partner or a business partner. And so I've had that like little things like that happen a lot when I would go do those things. And that enabled me to figure out what that feeling was in contrast to the mind's intuition. And for me, the mind was like a little bit delayed. Spleen comes in right away. The mind starts to try to put it together a couple seconds later. And the difference, I think, is like with the mind, when we're making a decision, we're usually making it so we can, with the mind, to know like what the potential outcome is going to be able to predict like what's going to happen. So we're trying to use the mind to make the most rational decision so that we are safe and we know everything's going to happen. When you're using the authority in your body to make the decision, there is a part of it that is like an unknown that to me, I've had to just learn just to be still with that and be trust. I have the little feeling. I know this is the right decision. My mind's going to come in 2 seconds later and start making logical sense of it and give me probably a different answer that will feel like it's going to be more secure because it's got all these data points that I know what's going to happen. With the spleen, it's like, I know this feeling is right. I have no clue how it's going to unfold, what the details are, or any of that. I just trust that it's going to be right and I will respond right when it occurs. So there is a part of it that like is hard to adjust to because with the mind, we used to have data points that would kind of fall in line with what we expected the outcome to be. And that's just not there anymore with the authority. And so there's a beauty in knowing that you don't know. And that's just kind of like, it's part of the game. It's a more harmonic way to play it, I believe, because if you knew everything, it just like the experience wouldn't be as fun. So that's part of it. And then the other thing that I think is really interesting is that some of these experiences I've had when I just trust that intuitive knowing, the way reality unfolds when I do that is so magical and synchronistic. Like everything falls in place at the right time. If it was a person that I was meeting at a coffee shop or whatever, they happened to be there for the 5 minutes that I showed up there because I went left there and I went right there and I got here in the right time. just in those 5-minute window, and I got to meet the person. Had I taken a left or a right differently, I wouldn't have been there at the same time. And to me, that's the magic of it, is like the mind does not have access to enough data points to make a magical synchronistic meetup like that happen. It's much less likely to happen when we're trying to find all the data and logic to get us to that place. If you trust the spleen, it will get you there the shortest way, the quickest and most harmonious, if you just trust it and not attach to how we're going to get there, all the little details. And that's the magic of it. Like I think I've experienced that enough, the not knowing and then going forward and having some wild thing occur, that I know I wouldn't have been able to line up with my mind. And when I have made decisions with my mind, it tends to lead me down a path that like I thought it was going to be something, and now it isn't, because I misread the data,
Right.
And so I think that's like, if we can get ourselves an experience of the magic of following that authority, it helps show you that the mind is just behind. It's a little clunky to make decisions with. The mind is amazing for crunching data, making a plan and blueprints and doing all of that, but it just doesn't have the capacity to fall in alignment with this like cosmic wisdom and where our soul really wants to go. The authority is like the direct way to get there. And I feel like I've known that just through a couple experiences, and it's still a practice. Like I still have to, it's hard to not know, it's like the feeling's there, but I don't really know sometimes. That can add pressure to it. But in doing that as well, it has made me like just sit back a bit more and let life kind of pull me along in a way, that my mind is not so quick to jump in and try to make logical sense of it, which oftentimes will just make me more anxious and kind of fearful around it. Whereas I just trust that there's like this inner knowing, and I will respond and know the right time to do the things. It just has liberated the pressure of every decision, to be honest.
Right.
And it has allowed me to like calm my mind down a bit more. It's not so monkey mindy on everything. It still can be, but when it's like that, I know that, okay, I need to tune into my body a little bit more. I'm not in alignment,
I think this is a really aptly timed episode, because this is coming out Sunday. So Friday we will have had, or Thursday we will have had, the first eclipse of eclipse season.
Lunar
and
eclipse.
I forgot we were going to talk about that. And so we have eclipses every 6 months. We have a lunar and a solar. They're 2 weeks apart. And so that's considered eclipse season. And eclipses are where things, beginnings and endings happen. I think the first one this time is an ending. And this is on the axis of Pisces and Virgo, and we are doing less of the Virgo energy, more of the Pisces energy currently. And Virgo shadow, which is what we would be releasing, is control, is wanting to manage and wanting everything to be perfect. And so I think that, it's very like breakups, deaths, job loss, like complete paradigm shifts are very common in eclipse season. They really only happen that way for people who have refused to read the writing on the wall. Most of the time, with the exception of people dying, nobody can, you don't get to decide when other people die. But breakups and job losses and stuff, there's typically signs, and we choose to, through attachment, hold on to things, cling to things. And so eclipses will often do that work for us. And the vibes that I've gotten for this eclipse season are really about our own relationship to controlling things. And I think I've probably been heavily deconditioning since 2017, probably. And I didn't really get into human design until more than halfway through that. But I had learned that there is some magic to what I now understand as my sacral, and that for a long time, I would judge myself because I wouldn't have energy to do things. Like, I have the ability to get like bureaucratic shit done, but only in a very small amount of time occasionally. And so it's really hard for me to like get bills finished and go to the DMV and go to the post office and get this sort of shit done. But I've learned that my body just will have a day where it's okay to do it and I can get it all done in one day. And so over the years, I learned to stop judging myself that I'm not getting these things done that I really don't like to do, because I will just snap in and have, I used to call them like 3D days. You know, I just have a matrix day, I would now call it. And I also learned that my desire to pivot suddenly or make decisions very fast is just magic for me. And there was a point when I first got clean where I let people tell me that that was impulsivity or whatever. And I tried to do things the slow way and it doesn't work for me. So I deconditioned a lot of these homogenized beliefs or beliefs of people around me that I should move through the world differently. I should stick to things. I should whatever. Because I've seen, same as you, like evidence that doing it my way does pay off for me. Something that has really changed in the last few years, and I don't think it's because I mentally was like, I'm deconditioning from human, but I can see it in the human design framework, is I've never had less of agenda. And that's what I think the real, when we're talking about the mind, that's the real magic of passenger consciousness. Is most of my life I've been trying to impose my will on reality. And my relationship with trying to manifest, when I was spent years trying to figure out those mechanisms, part of the reason it didn't work is because I had such an agenda of how I wanted things to look. I want to end up with that person. I want to make this much money doing this thing. I want my health to be this, It was a very controlling, micromanaging way to move through the world. And it also, I would spend a lot of time shadow boxing things that I could not change, like other people. And so my desire to control would lead to a lot of frustration, which is how, as a manifesting generator, I know that I'm not in my power, right? I would, burn myself into frustration. Like everything I would try to do would hit some sort of snag. And like every single thing in my life is a test of patience. And so you've seen this. If I get excited about something, it goes into some sort of delay every fucking time. And now I'm very like surrendered to it. Or it's just like I have an agenda. Like I started working out and then it's just been one thing after another. Like there's some sort of like pressure there. If I get too excited about something, I create resistance. And so moving into passenger consciousness, which I didn't even do on purpose, is I just don't really have an agenda. And part of that came from, to be honest, getting Lyme disease and having it just take my career, like all that momentum. I spent years building that momentum. And then the pandemic hits. And so that was going to slow it down anyway. But then I spent the entire pandemic getting my brain eaten by Lyme disease. And then as soon as I get better, and I fought pretty hard to get better, I had to surrender to having it. But then once I started to kick it, I was like, okay, getting back, like getting my strength back, whatever. And then I get pregnant and then boom, a miscarriage and then I almost die. And then I'm back in the recovery mode. And then there was something by the end of that experience that I was just like,
fuck it,
dude. I'm just here for the ride, because the further I push on reality, the more resistance I get.
Yeah.
And so if I was supposed to be a stand-up comedian, there wouldn't just be fucking brick wall after brick wall. So I'm just going to trust that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And even in, when I realized I had Lyme disease, I was like 4 months in. I felt great when I took the antibiotics. As soon as I went off the antibiotics, I got sick again. So then I started an herbal protocol. And then I herxed, which is where you get sick because your body's trying to kick it. And that moment was like this realization that, oh, you're going to play through, you're going to know you're going to know the experience of chronic illness. And there was just kind of like, I have no choice but to surrender. And there really wasn't anything you could do. This is the fall of 2020. You couldn't even go to a doctor. Do you know what I mean? It was like, and then the brain fog kicked in and I couldn't research. This is how I figure most things out, is through investigating, but I couldn't even investigate because my brain wouldn't work. And so at the end of that, I have an enormous trust in the process. And it's like, if tomorrow I found out I had a brain tumor, or tomorrow I lost someone very close to me, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. I'm not like, wouldn't be stoked, I guess, but the acceptance that I would pretty immediately find in that I'm here to experience whatever it is that I'm here to experience. And I'm not going to control that, because any attempt to control that has never worked. And, you know, it's fun to experience the beautiful parts of it. It sucks to experience the parts that aren't beautiful. But if I look back on my life, those experiences have paid dividends.
Yeah.
And
there's always new meaning in a lot of those experiences that in the moment we label as bad.
Right.
Later, there's like always meaning in those things. You know, it changes over time. And I have the same thing. It's like at a certain point, I just realized like I'm not, this pushing and forcing is like creating more chaos and more discomfort, that it's at some point it's just kind of like you see that there's a waste of energy or something, and that it's much easier to fall in line and just like float with the river. And like there's, I don't know, there's like, to me, when you do that too, there are revelations that come that are things like, oh, I thought I wanted that, but now that it's reality's unfolded and I'm not having it, I'm like so thankful I don't have it. Actually, I'm glad that didn't work out because of so and so. And within that process, you start to learn more about what you actually want, and you start to get a glimmer of what your soul is actually trying to do here. And it doesn't involve pushing and prodding and like forcing it into submission. It's actually like getting it into submission by harmonizing with it and like stepping back, not labeling things, not assuming you know what the experience is and attaching to things. So there's like this floaty kind of like I'm along for the ride and I'm observing things with not a like rush to label them and attach. It's all very open-handed, you know? And that has created, it's like way more flowy, way more stable emotions, and like less triggering, getting activated, because I'm not as attached anymore. That's where it's all coming from.
Right.
Is that I am so sure that I'm not supposed to experience this, and like this is all wrong. When you're not in that state, it's like you don't experience it. I don't know. It's weird. There's definitely resistance and things that I don't enjoy, but you move through them quickly, and then a year later, you realize, look, I actually did need that experience. I'm very thankful now. So yeah, it's quite a paradox and illusion of the mind thing, and that's that. To catch it, you have to be able to like stop and just be observing yourself to even catch that a lot of these things you're labeling and are so upset about, like, might not have as much weight as you think they do. You know, you can't realize that until you stop and look and just observe objectively.
Well, I feel like we've talked about resistance before, but resistance is when you're talking about energy and the wiring under the board of reality. Resistance is this force that really burns you if you don't understand it. If you are pushing at reality, it pushes back at you, and you can just end up in this perpetual, you're going nowhere, you're running on a treadmill. And if you cling or grab or pine for or yearn for something in reality, it runs away from you. You know, it's like a cat. It's like you go over to someone's house and they have a cat. It's not your cat. I mean, it can be your cat also. And you go, come here. And you like go, oh my God, kitty. And you go towards it. It's going to run away from you, right? But if you just sit down and fucking exist, the cat is more likely to come up and get on your lap. It's very similar to how the algorithm of reality works.
Yeah.
When you are telling reality, I'm not supposed to be experiencing this, or this isn't the way it should be, or whatever, which these concepts don't exist in the universe. These are mind matrix concepts. You also don't you don't hit the checkpoints. It's like if your soul came here to experience these things and then you just go into opposition about them, especially things that your body wants to do. So, if I do sessions with someone who's like, I can't stop vaping, I don't think vaping is good for you, but I'm still going to give you the advice that stop trying to stop vaping because you're creating resistance and judgment and shame. And none of those exist on the frequency where you no longer vape.
Right.
You have to first accept the part of you that does it because you're doing it. So you have to accept that, number one. Number two, you have to get curious about why you are doing this. What are you drawn to? What do you think it's going to provide you? And you have to be able to observe those aspects of yourself without judgment. If you keep going for shitty situationships, you have to learn to love the part of yourself, not in a cheesy way, but you have to unconditionally love the part of you that is choosing shitty relationships. But we go into this why can't I fix this? Why can't I stop this? Why can't I stop smoking weed all the time? Why can't I stop eating sugar? Why can't I stop drinking? And it's like that you are rejecting an aspect of yourself that is trying to learn something. And it's the same thing with the collective experience. We need to stop people from doing it. We need to stop this from happening. We need to stop this. And I think the thing that's also confusing is that we equate a resistance with let's say resistance movements in the past that have moved the needle socially. And I think that this is something that's going to be very confusing for people as we shift into individual energy, because we were living in a consensus reality. So in the past, if a group of people got a lot of energy around resisting things, it would move the needle because we lived in a consensus reality. So if one consensus group could make their consensus big energetically, it would move.
It would get adopted.
The thing, right?
Yeah.
But because the energies are changing and the consensuses are actually breaking up into individual things, what a lot of resistance to, let's say what's happening politically right now, a lot of that resistance is actually feeding the thing you don't want because the energy is not being moved, in a productive way. So if you're just in resistance to something, you are feeding it energy. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Resistance will entangle you with something in a way that I just don't have a good analogy for, but it's almost you get stuck in the brambles of it.
Yeah.
When you start thrashing around in it. And a lot of resistance is shadow boxing, this concept of I feel like we already talked about this on here, but this shouldn't be.
Right.
And so a lot of what we do in life is wrestle with the external parts of reality and whether or not they should exist. So the other people in your life, they should be doing things different. The world at large, it should be different. The entire constructs of however things are built, it should be different. And all those things can be true, but they're not, you can't externally change those things. And so that is a very masculine energy way to look at things, that I need to fix it. I need whatever. Where a receptive feminine energy way of looking at things is to receive what is available from it.
Yeah.
Right.
And accept this is happening. It's not, I'm not going to be in a delusion, say it can't or shouldn't happen.
Because it already is.
It's happening. And then now what can I do to respond?
And the thing is that the answer to, let's say on the world stage, the answer to the things that are going to happen is innovation. And It's not innovate, not recreate the wheel, not negotiate what is. It is creating something completely new. And that innovation comes from that creative space, and that creative space comes from like curiosity and kind of flexibility, right? And so the being in that, what is that? Get it. Oh my God, there's a black widow on our couch. The first spider Mark's ever killed in my entire time knowing him. Do they even go in houses usually?
Not usually. I feel like he maybe hitched a ride in here.
Hitched a ride on a cat? Yeah. Maybe you wanted to podcast. Are they like aggressive? Do they like, or you have to fuck with them to get bit?
Yeah, they have to be threatened to bite you.
Yeah.
But it's hard to determine what threatens a spider. You know, they're not going to like try to come bite you out of nowhere. You'd have to be like encroaching on their nest, or they feel offended with what you've been saying.
Yeah, they didn't like
your
this.
political views and stuff like that.
Tired of your anarchist shit. I'm going in that house and I'm going to shut that lady up.
So where do you think all of this, or did you have something you were going to say? You're pulling from there.
No, I don't remember what I was saying. Probably nothing important.
Well, I think what might be interesting about this, because it's, I mean, we could briefly talk about it, but this does kind of bring up free will in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Because with this passenger thing, it's easy to confuse that with like, well, where is my agency? Like, what if I'm having to ride along with wherever the reality is pulling me and accept that? Like, where's my decision in this, you know?
Yeah.
But to me, I think that's like going too extreme with I think we're coming from a place where we think we're like the ones that need to make all the decisions and force it. And so when we give up a little bit of that, I think everybody rushes to, well, but then why can't I'm the one who I want to make the decisions. I don't want to have this universe be making the decision for me. Where's my free will? I just don't think it's that black and white. And it's a similar thing with art, you know, like with what I'm always going on about. It's like everything you're saying there earlier about like being out of the way and kind of collaborating with the universe, not trying to push and control everything. In music, it's the same thing with the muse. It's like you can't come in with an agenda and try to control the final outcome. The muse does not show up in that space because you're closed off, essentially. Being open, having a direction you're wanting to go, and what's the word?
Like a vision?
A vision or like a intention with it, but not too attached to the details of how it's going to get there or what it's going to be, is like when you can operate with the muse. And so is that final product less me because I was mostly downloading this information from the muse and that's not me? Or, you know, like you can also get into this idea of free will. Is it not really me if I'm collaborating? What is full individuality? You know, is that not downloading information from other beings or from your higher self or from the cosmos? Like, where's the line? Is that me? You know, it's like in this idea of oneness. It's like we're all God, or we're made in the image of God. We are that. So I've never heard, I've heard a lot of people give decent, in-depth reasons of why they think we don't have free will. And I've just never found any of them to work for me because people are just they're not looking at the nuance to it. It's like they're just assuming too much and then jumping to that conclusion. And a lot of the paradoxical information around free will and this idea of like passenger consciousness, it does have a lot of like dead ends that you could come to the conclusion that there's no free will. But I do think it's a misunderstanding with the origin of what we all are, and that it is this one thing. And being like more in resonance or in flow and being like open to that other like information that is coming from you at a higher self. So it is you, but all of that, like that is within free will. Like you're choosing to do that. And it's just, I don't think it's this black and white where the line between me as an individual and what like collective consciousness is, or the source. I think those are all like very intertwined. And to say that we don't have free will and that we're just like a cog in a wheel and you have to accept that is a misunderstanding of what it means to have like individual autonomy and creative power that's coming from the cosmos, which is you. That's all like, that all works because of free will to me.
Yeah, I mean, the further I get into this process, it just gets more complex and more paradoxical, but like, I guess complex is the word I'm looking for, to where free will is such a this or that conversation.
Yeah, that's what it always goes that direction. And
right.
I've never found anybody that's really nuanced in the middle.
Because the initial arguments are, do we have free will or is everything predetermined? Which is two huge...
Those are so far apart.
They're so far apart. And they're like, why is that the only two options? And then there's like, are we just carrying out what God wants us to do? Or, you know, I guess like maybe a different one is like, we've already done this before. We always do the same thing. I don't know, but it's, do you have the ability to make decisions about the path that you take? And then what everyone is equating to that, I feel like, in the conversations I've had, I'm sure there's deeper philosophical discussions on free will I'm not privy to, but it's like, what are you calling you? Are you calling your conscious mind? Because what I think that this is saying with the passenger consciousness is your conscious mind is not you. Your conscious mind is a collection of shit you've picked up from other people. So if your conscious mind is telling you you need to quit vaping, the odds are that your reasons for wanting to quit vaping, and I'm saying this as someone who doesn't think vaping is good for you, but like the reason that you are trying to quit vaping is because other people think it's bad for you. You've heard that medicine has said it's bad for you. You've picked up these reasons. However, your body is making a different decision because your body is grabbing the vape. And whether that also could be like you're just addicted to it. You're running a cycle.
Yeah. So where is the I in all of this?
Where is
That's
the I?
nuance.
I think that I think it's just it's actually a materialist question about free will, especially when we're talking about passenger consciousness, because passenger consciousness is not saying the universe is making your decisions. It's saying that your body is making your decisions. It's recognizing that the body actually holds the intelligence and that the mind is like, you know, it's the ego. It's not the ego, but it's similar to the ego in that it's a collection of conditioning and programming
that like builds your mask, builds your identity,
right?
In
it's
the
not
reality
your source
to plug and play and do the stuff. But yeah, it is not the finitude of. It's not the source.
And my perspective for what life is, and what brings me to acceptance when things outside of me are not aligning with my agenda, is that my higher self, which I feel like I have more access now than ever before, but that my higher self came here to experience things that it came here to experience. And my higher self then, in partnership with my body, is going to align to experiences that my higher self, an expression of God, the imagination, whatever, wanted to experience. And now obviously my conscious mind is going to be, I would not like those losses. I would not like the pain. I would not like the trauma. I would not like the difficulties or the being a square peg in a round hole or whatever. Of course not, because I'm the one experiencing it. But the aspects of me that brought me into this world with the astrology that I have and the wiring that I have, and born in the time that I was, to the parents I was born to, it knew what it wanted to experience. And the process of integrating for me has and getting connected to that higher self is I stopped fighting it. I stopped, I truly do not believe that that the universe has an agenda, that there is a God making me do things or whatever. I truly believe myself, my individual consciousness wanted to know what certain things feel like. And that's what has given me, as time has progressed, this just surrender to what is. And then as a result of not fighting things, my life has gotten easier. But part of the reason that life has gotten easier is because when things that are not super fun come into my reality, I'm just kind of surrendered to them. And there was always an aspect of me that was, I don't know, very accepting of whatever was. Like when the shit would actually hit the fan or I would actually be experiencing trauma, there has always been a very resilient part of me that can just be there in the moment.
And be like, I'm still alive.
It's just fucking whatever. We're just getting through this. Like a lot of times I don't even realize how fucked something was until I'm on the other side of it. But in things like, let's say, relationships or financial stuff, I have experienced a lot of resistance to what is. Like when dealing with a lot of poverty, I spent a lot of time longing and craving for things to be different and shadow boxing with it's not fair. And then, in relationships that weren't working, there was a lot of pining for a secret third thing or trying to control how someone else shows up in the world, And in those times, I dealt with a lot of frustration and grief and unnecessary pain, suffering, because I was resisting the reality of what is. And so in the conversation of free will, it is, you are actually moving into your true will by moving into the body's truth that doesn't have the agenda of your mind.
To me, it's a more like, I think what people are equating to like not having free will by saying like everything is pre-planned, pre-programmed. It's a simulation. That like submitting or surrendering to this body authority, this like other cosmic intelligence would be like, oh, this is not me making the decision, this other thing is, which we just are so obsessed with, like everything's external from us, so it's separate.
Right.
But the nuance there and the profound thing is like that it's actually a more pure, like subtle and elevated version of yourself that you are not fighting anymore. You're not like resisting, you're surrendering to and becoming more full actually of free will and more full of awareness to be able to have more complex experiences and control those experiences. So it's like, it's actually an accentuation of free will, or maybe it's not an accentuation. It's an accentuated like space of awareness to enact free will from, is by surrendering to that, But I think so many people, we jump to that conclusion that it's like, it's a simulation and all of that seems real too. And quantum physics is showing that. And like, then you just jump to, well, then where's my agency in this? It's everything's pre-planned. Then I guess just fuck it. And like, I'll just go with it. But I just, there's no part of me that like, whenever I've heard those examples and people that say free will, there's the creative part of me that I often feel attached to the source. There was this like infinite creative, like curiosity when you're in balance. It's just like endless potential energy of like anything. That's the essence of of like consciousness and creativity. And I don't think like a source or like the all be all God would build a system that is like pre-planned that you just fall in line with and you get led around like a little puppet. Like, what is the point of that?
Right.
What is the final outcome? Why would a God do that? Just so he can have like, he has all the experiences from it. It's a not very creative like idea of what we're doing right now. You know, it's far more captivating to me that we are in a very, very advanced piece of like tech that is about like forgetting that we have this infinite capacity, and we've created these like worlds to navigate through to one, help us evolve and grow, two, to help us not be bored, to just go do something, like experience something, and to be able to be put into a system where like you believe that you're separate, you forget that you're all one thing, and you in some ways believe that you don't have any agency and free will, but you do. And the tension from that and being able to like create and move in the world, like that's just a far more compelling idea to me, that it goes that direction. It doesn't make any, like, there's so many, and it's very complex. It would be a long conversation of like, how advanced that idea is, that we invented the idea of limitation and death from a infinite existence,
right,
is really profound. And the amount of potential possibilities to experience when you've created that is endless as well. There's like just so many different things you can set up and experience, different civilizations, different parameters, like all within that, predicated on the idea that you have free will to move through it how you want and make of it what you will. It's like, I don't know. It's a very dark, not compelling, and it doesn't have much like grounding to it in as much data as we know right now, that it is a simulated program that you have no agency over, is the closest thing I can think to like an eternity of hell. I don't know why that we would be in that. Like, it just does not make any sense. A lot of the pain and suffering that is coming from a system where a bunch of people have free will is because it's that advanced, and we like it gets hijacked and it gets taken over, because that's part of the whole game. But it's a part of a desired experience, I think, from all of us, is the illusion of separation and division.
Limitation, yeah.
It's from an infinite existence. That's something you desire. I know that in myself. Like, just thinking through that, I'm like, at least for me as an individual, at some point of that infinite, I would figure out a way to try to like forget that it's there.
Right. Yeah. So this is definitely like not that. It's just the body is the driver and the mind is the observer. And the observer is important. And this is also like, if we go back to, let's say, the person who wants to stop drinking, my advice is always accept the part of you that drinks, resign to the reality that you drink. Resigning to like accepting and surrendering to the reality of what is will not make it permanent. It's actually quite the opposite. And so it's the same thing with like, people think you have to fight every fucking thing. Like, if I got cancer, I would be accepting cancer would be the first thing. The whole like, I'm going to battle this cancer is like, it's an entanglement energy. I would accept it. I would sit with it. I would get to know it, and, you know, and then move with my body's like truth about what's due. I would seek to understand the imbalance or whatever that got us here, and what am I supposed to learn from this experience, you know? Because there's something in your body and you're going to war with it. Do you understand the fucking why this doesn't work for most people?
And that's also, I think there's a huge misunderstanding in this like conversation, is that a misunderstanding of like the vehicles we're in and the power that is there. What you fucking focus on and think about is what's going to happen.
Right.
And that's profound. I mean, that's we all want this. That's like so amazing that we have that. we've just been, in the forgettingness of it. It's like there's the capability of people hijacking, our awareness and of the meaning of what it is to be alive. But I think that's like, so there's like these training wheels. We're learning how to like get back to a reality where we understand the power of our thoughts and our mind and what we're doing, and remember how to use it and create worlds with it, and I think that's what we did with this. It's just like one of the ones where you have to remember to get up out of it.
Yeah.
And it might be the very beginning of what it is to be, what it means to be a sentient, conscious being in the cosmos. It's like we're in the beginning phases of being able to learn the responsibility to actually go like build worlds with our consciousness,
Right. So like the ability to observe the reality of where we're at. So, I don't want to drink anymore when you try to manifest from that perspective, you just keep recreating the thing you don't want to experience. So instead it's like, oh, interesting. I'm drinking. I wonder why. I wonder what's drawing me to this experience, and then getting curious with it and wherever that takes you, I've had a few habits recently that they are having a impact on my life that I'm not loving. Right. And so then I get into curiosity about it, and it comes down to dopamine seeking. Oh, interesting. So what's my relationship with dopamine? And then getting to know this, but it's all from this, like pointing my awareness at it and becoming more aware of it. And once I became aware of this habit is dopamine seeking, or, if it's drinking, it's like getting to know why, what do I think that drinking is going to provide me? And then what do I feel like before I do it? What do I feel like while I'm drunk? What do I feel like afterwards? And then that's it. You just keep observing it. And it starts to become something else. And then you stop, like the behavior tends to fall off because you've fully witnessed all there is. And when you look at it from the perspective that like, I came here to know what it feels like to be an addict, and that's really what happened to me with meth. Was I started it. I loved it. It was amazing. It provided me with all of these things that actually weren't coming from, well, I think part of it was medicating my ADHD, but it took me outside of society, and I was too overly focused on society's expectations or society's way of doing things. And it showed me an alternate way of living. But then it did start to become repetitive, and it did also come with violence and people at their worst doing their worst things, including me, and having to have a substance in order to function fucking sucks. And the substance was starting to get shittier and shittier. And there were just all these things that I just was observing them and thinking about them and not trying to take any action. And then one day I just kind of clicked out of it. And it was like, I was never going to go back to using because I wasn't doing it on purpose. I didn't think I was going to quit ever, but I just had come to a point where I was pondering on a regular basis the diminishing returns of the substance and the increasing frustrating loops of it, And then after I seen my dad for the first time in 5 years, he just said, let me, if it ever gets stale, you can always come back here. And it's such a smart thing to say to me. And so I went home, and it was drama, people stealing stuff. Somebody fucked my boyfriend, like, la, 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 la. And I was like, oh, this is stale. This is precisely stale, And so that's when we just trust what the body is doing. And when I say the body is doing it, it's like the body is telling you don't have energy to keep going to that job. So if you trust the body, you're just like, yeah, I cannot fucking get this body to work one more time. The body is the one that got sick and wouldn't let you get on the airplane. The body is the one that's giving you that nagging feeling about something. The body is the one that is like, today we're going to rest instead of it's just like I now understand that it's like my body doesn't like this food. My body doesn't like this activity. My body doesn't enjoy being around this group of people. My body doesn't enjoy drinking alcohol. My body doesn't enjoy these fabrics. Like, it's just this kind of trust, Every time I get on the phone, it's like, your sheets are poison. This is poison. And while I think most things have become poison, I have learned to just trust this sensitive ass body, that if the body likes the sheets, it doesn't matter.
No matter what anybody says.
It doesn't matter what it's made out. If the body likes the food, it doesn't matter what this influencer is saying. My body likes it. But in the old reality, we're like feeding the body trash that it hates, walking around with food sensitivities, and we're like, I have heartburn. No, your body doesn't like the food that you're eating. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your body doesn't. It's the headaches. I had chronic headaches because my body didn't like gluten.
Yeah, that's for me. Doing like just even beginning to do this. I mean, I'm not like by any means like good at it, but the starting to tune into the body's like wisdom that I realized how desensitized I was maybe to certain things. Like, I just gotten used to them. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like starting to do this and like really tuning into the body, what it desires, eventually starts to increase the sensitivity. Actually, like, you start to notice like, oh wow, that like smell it gave me a headache. Like, it's that smell. Actually, I noticed that it gave me a headache. Or you start to tune into things that, like, for me, I was overlooking and just assuming it was like being affected from something else, and just overlooked it a lot. I think the more we tune into that, you start to realize it's actually like really complex, this whole body thing. There's like a lot of different feelings and sensations. And, I mean, I think a lot of this we don't understand because we just haven't been educated in it. But the energy field and the left side and the right side of the body, they all, like, everything's got its own depth to it that you can really dive into and actually get a lot of information from. And the more sensitive you start to feel into the different like centers of the body and what they mean, then it's like a new decoding thing, a map to kind of find synchronistic elements in as well. But I just mentioned that because I think it's there in my head, or I don't know if I'm like hearing in the ether. Some people might be confused with like, what is my body saying? Like, I want to go drink, but like, isn't that my mind wanting to do that because it's wanting to avoid the emotion?
Yeah.
Or am I like, maybe I'm really thirsty and it's not alcohol and I need water actually, like where is the wisdom of the body? Like, what is that, Because I think, and a lot of us are just disconnected from it,
and so I think it takes 7 years of deconditioning makes sense, especially if you're, over the age of 30 and you've been living according to social norms or addictive behaviors or programmed things. Do you know what I mean? Because some of it is just like, if you vape all day, you connect every aspect of your life to the vaping. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, after I eat this, I vape. After I poop, I vape. After I do this, I vape. After I have a conversation, I vape. So now you're also physically addicted, which just takes 4 days to get rid of. But then you've also connected all these aspects of your life to the vape.
Yeah.
And so some of that is just like, oh, these are mechanisms for how the body works. In order to quit them, I need to be able to neutrally look at these connections in my brain. Because I do this with I did this with cigarettes and I did this with hot beverages, to where like, if I eat food, after I finish the food, I have to have a hot beverage because I've connected those two things in my brain. And for my entire adult life, up until very recently, every time I wake up, I have to have a hot beverage before I could even start. It's coffee until coffee started making me sick, but I don't do that anymore. I have changed that to where now the first thing I do is eat and go for a walk. And I don't have a hot beverage until way later, but I had to
observe that first.
Observe that for a very long time and be like, okay, now I have just convinced that I have to have this. And so how can I shift that energy? But I had to come from and like, obviously that's not, drinking coffee is very normal in the morning, but there is stigma around drinking alcohol, weed, stuff. And so when we are engaging with the stigma, we are in conditioning.
Yeah.
It is reality that alcohol is not good for your body. It is reality that caffeine's not great for your body. Smoking, vaping, these things are not good for your body. So it's not that your body wants them, but it's that you've like, we when we do these habits, we do wire them into our being, and judging them does not make them go away, you know? And so, and there is a part of us that wants to understand, like I had to understand meth addiction. I had to have that experience. There is no way that I ever would have healed from the trauma of being raised by a meth addict without going and being a meth addict. That's so obvious to me. And then, you know, her mom was an addict, and there, you know, we have my family lineage is just so much addiction and alcoholism. I had to break those family curses to not pass them on to my children. Like I had to go do that and break that, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's like the physical body, and then there is I think part of what passenger consciousness is talking about is like the body as an oracle for what the higher self wants. And I do think that like higher consciousness is integration with the higher self, to where the higher self is not a fucking mystery.
Right.
And that's what I feel like I no longer am really experiencing my own personal agenda. I'm just like, yeah, cool. If something comes up, I'll take it. And then if it doesn't, then yeah, I don't know. Okay. So a couple things that were in here that I thought was interesting, and then we can wrap up. Aspects of passenger consciousness are understanding the vehicle versus the passenger. So the vehicle becomes the driver, and the passenger is the mind that's observing and experiencing. Strategy and authority are the driver. Detaching from the mind's control. True passenger consciousness happens when the mind lets go of control and simply watches life unfold. Surrender and trust. Embracing passenger consciousness means trusting your vehicle, your body, will take you where you need to go. This allows for a deeper sense of flow, ease, and alignment. Yeah, and so here's when pertaining to what's going to happen for the next 10 years, is we're going to go through incredible changes to everything we've known to be reality. And there's going to be, in so much as you experience the system as reality, is how much that will be difficult, I think, right? But then there are other things that are just going to affect whoever they're going to affect. I don't think you can higher consciousness your way out of, you know, these changes, I guess. You know, every natural disasters, wars, all this stuff, you know, it's all going to impact us in some way, shape, or form. But how much it impacts you, like the level of resistance we have is, so like we talk about this all the time. Like we have an open hand to like, we might get nuked. You know, we might be where a flood is. We might be where an earthquake is. I mean, being as locked into our truth as possible, meaning we're listening to our bodies. Our bodies might guide us out of the harm's way, but our bodies might also put us straight into the line of fire because we're meant to be there to be of assistance or something. And so if we are doing what our bodies say to do and we end up in a flood zone and we experience these floods, you know, because everything's unprecedented, so you can't mentally plan anything, then the assumption is that this is what we were supposed to experience. Like we obviously wanted to know what this felt like, or we needed to innovate, or we needed to be here to help other people, or whatever. There is just this kind of acceptance. If we were doing what we were supposed to be doing, and this has happened to us, and you get led to somewhere where then, you know, we just had something where we were working on something for a couple months that it felt our bodies told us we were supposed to do it. And then all it led to was like a loss of a lot of money. And it, you know, we were at the end of it, still haven't quite figured out what the lesson was, but it was just kind of like an immediate, like, okay, well, for some reason we were supposed to experience that,
Yeah.
So I guess that's what it is. We just had another thing with repair on the house. It's also very expensive, and it's like, okay, well, I guess this is going to make sense later, or
And some
whatever.
of it, it's like hard to make sense of like why we're having certain experiences. It will make sense later, or even like it could be you're having certain experiences to learn more about how to make the right decision or not,
right?
Because all through that experience that we were like pushing for, it ultimately didn't work. The first, I would say, like the second or third hurdle that came up, I started to go, that's a weird resistance. Maybe we're not supposed to do this, actually. And started to hone into it. And we had conversations, and then we like moved forward. A couple more hurdles came in. It's like, I don't know. I think we still should push, though. Like it feels like maybe this is just a little bit of an impediment. Let's just keep going. And then it didn't work. And so by the end of that, it's like, oh, interesting. There's probably something else from that experience, but it's helpful for me to like tune in. Oh, it was a little more clear that we shouldn't have. We probably should have pulled the trigger earlier. We wouldn't have lost that money.
Right.
And so it's sometimes you could be having a whole goddamn experience just so you understand a little more details on like how off you are or how on you are.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great example of like, we thought we were being very open, but we did kind of have an agenda. It was something that was going to help someone else out and also bring us something that would have been fun, and so we were maybe more attached to that idea, and then reality was kind of showing us no, and then mentally I couldn't figure out why it would be a no, and so I did just kind of keep pushing.
Yeah.
And I feel like everything is just been showing me pretty much no pushing. I mean, I feel like that's the reflection I keep getting. I used to be such a bulldozer, and now it's just, I'm still working this out. I guess I have to keep having these experiences, but I'm like, no pushing.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And I think it could be a little bit different for each energy type and what the alignments are. But like that, like for me, that's held true pretty much so far. Like I feel like when it's right, like there's not much resistance. If the resistance comes up, you got to push a little bit. It's because we're supposed to have that experience of the tension and pushing and learning that. But yeah, I think we're going to be moving more and more into alignment as a collective and just individually doing work that I think we're going to get to a place where like there's not going to be much pushing needed, and like for a projector, I'm thinking the differences in the types, because the projector is a magnet. Like when they're in alignment, they magnetize people and they magnetize experiences that they want. Only when they're in alignment. When they're not in alignment, you're magnetizing all kinds of bullshit. But when I have hit those strides of like being really in alignment, and I don't sustain it very long because we're all learning, but like that it's just effortless. Like everything flows. Everything comes in naturally. Everything moves out naturally. It's great.
Yeah.
So I do think that's like something we're moving to. It can take a minute to perfect that, but
yeah, that one's been a little,
it's
because I
almost
love to solve problems and I love to overcome obstacles. And so
I was going to say though, because I think that's like, it's almost it's like relabeling what tension or resistance is.
Yeah.
Because I think it is always like, especially if you're in a binary reality, if you're in a dual reality, like there's two things, you're always going to have tension, two opposites. And the tension is what creates the spark of creativity in life. So that's, I think, part of like a 3D reality, but it's like the tension starts to become something else. It's like a part of the outcome or something. It's like a part of the process, and it is no longer, you don't need to push against it. You just allow the tension or something. It's like, so you redefining what it is no longer feels like you're pushing and forcing reality. You're using the effects of reality to have an experience kind of thing.
Right.
That makes sense?
Yeah. It's a learning curve for sure.
Mm-hmm. the free will conversation in general, all of this is like, it is such a paradox. It ends up becoming hard to use words with it. But
so just a couple things on the deconditioning process, and then we'll go. How deconditioning leads to passenger consciousness. By breaking the mind's control, most people are conditioned to believe their mind is in charge, leading to anxiety, indecision, and misalignment. That's the thing I want to say, is that the easy for you to say thing, which maybe nobody is saying, but I think that when things are difficult, so like, let's say your relationships are not what you want them to be, financial obviously is a huge one for people right now. The government thing is a huge, like, what the fuck is happening is a huge thing for people right now. The mind doesn't actually solve any of the problems, is what, right? So it's like telling your mind to take the fucking hop over in the passenger seat and then allowing and observing does not, I think there is this concept of like, well, then I'm just like, then I'm just letting these things happen. Right. And the question is, with your mind shadowboxing, is it stopping the things from happening? Has it changed your circumstances? Has judging yourself for drinking changed the drinking? Has screaming that this shouldn't be happening in the government, has that stopped it from happening? Has the resistance changed your circumstances? Because that's the difference, is that the mind doesn't actually solve problems ever. It just creates more problems. The conditioning, especially right now, where we're like that conditioning that we have picked up for the last 400 years will not serve us where we are going. And so it's never been more important to release the conditioning, because the new conditioning coming in is going to create an environment that the only path forward is through your own personal truth. And so, and your own personal truth is in our bodies. And so that is, my own personal truth is not in whether or not I've been productive today according to some standard. My own personal truth is in whether or not I had the energy to do what I had to do. And the reality of the changes that are happening is that they are happening, and the resistance that we are familiar with is not changing that. We have not managed to change that with our resistance. So deconditioning helps you recognize when the mind is making fear-based or externally influenced decisions rather than simply observing. Reconnecting with the vehicle, which is the body. Through deconditioning, you learn to trust your body's intelligence and let it guide your life, allowing you to relax into the passenger role. Releasing external pressures. The world pressures us to act in ways that do not align with our design, e.g. societal expectations, family conditioning, or cultural beliefs. Deconditioning allows us to release those pressures so you can operate from your true nature rather than trying to be something you're not. Experiencing life instead of controlling it. I think this is the hugest one. Once deconditioning removes the mind's false authority, you can surrender to the flow of life and experience it from a state of awareness rather than control. This allows for a more aligned, fulfilling, and effortless way of being. The deconditioning process is awareness, recognizing the ways conditioning affects your decisions and behavior, experimentation, which I guess is kind of that experience that we had, right? Is we were trying to do something that seemed like it was cool and aligned, and we experimented with it and learned like, oh, maybe resistance is a lot more subtle than we were looking for. Trust and surrender, allowing the body to lead while the mind observes, and time and patience. And this is why it's like a 7-year process.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's also, that spleen experiment I was talking about. I mean, I tell every person I talk to that's a projector or splenic in general, I tell them to go do that, because it really is such a fun, easy thing to experience. But, we all have intuition. So, I mean, the spleen it's a little different than intuition, but I still think that's a fun thing for anybody to go do, you can kind of get tuned into your body a bit more. Like if you really focus on just like when you're driving, it's like, I have nowhere to be, nowhere to go. And I'm going to try to even look at the terrain as an observer, like I've never seen it before, and just follow like what your gut instinct says every time. and see just where it takes you, what experiences you have, what you observe as synchronistic elements. I think it's just a fun thing to do, to see where your intuition or your higher self or the cosmos will pull you.
Yeah.
And to just experience what it feels like to kind of be along for the ride instead of having this direct agenda of where you need to go. And even trying to, like I said, like trying not to recognize where you're at, you know. I think it's just a great experiment to get us a little more out of the mind and in touch with this other thing, you know.
Yeah. I love that. I guess for sacral, it would just be like what you have energy to do. Like just trusting. That's the way I've started framing it is my sacral likes that. My sacral doesn't like that. When my sacral activates on it, I'll let you know. And I was talking to Coco, my 30-year-old daughter, the other day, and she was like, when you first started saying that sacral, she's also sacral. When you first started saying that, like my sacral hasn't activated on it yet. She was like, I was like, what the fuck? She said, but that is actually the most liberating shit.
Yeah.
Because it takes all the guilt and shame away from the framing that I'm lazy if I'm not doing whatever the thing is, where it's just like my sacral is not activated on going to the DMV. So when it does, I will, you know. And for people with emotional authority who have the most mental analysis paralysis, I think, emotional authority is like, you just have to feel all your feelings about it first. And that can take 5 minutes or a month or longer. And there is like, I don't know, society kind of rushes you to know, you know, even though I would say as someone with a sacral authority, society was always pressuring me to slow down. I think when you have emotional authority, and you've surrounded yourself with sacral or splenic people, you know, it's the mind tries to fill in the blanks while the body just needs to feel its feelings. And so it needs to feel good about going to the movies. It needs to feel bad about going to the movies. It needs to feel like all the feelings. And then you have clarity. But if you don't have clarity that's just in your body, then you just don't know yet. And the mind, I can always tell when someone has emotional authority because they list off, well, on one hand, it would be good. They list off like a pros and cons list to me, and it goes on and on and on and contradicts itself. And I'm like, do you have emotional authority? Because it's always yes. All right. Well, I love you.
I love you too.
It's good talking to you again.
Yeah. Nice talking to you.
Thanks for stopping by. Sessions and shows, you know where to find them. Love you. Bye.
Peace.